Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta, coming out on time on all platforms that we posted on. Apologies last week. I forgot to hit the schedule button on YouTube, and so the episode came out on like Friday. I was like, I wonder how the Metapod episode's doing. You know, if we got any nice comments that I need to respond to. And I was like, it has no views, no comments, no likes.
Well,
and I
that's
was
weird.
like, oh, yeah, that's. I mean, I know we're not the biggest podcast ever, but that's kind of unusual. And then I just realized I'd never released it. So hopefully this one comes out on time on your Tuesday morning, whatever you do. But Sean, how has your week been?
Oh boy, the week was good. Jake and I both were playing Pokemon over the weekend. I know you went to a league challenge, I believe.
I did, yeah. I went to a league challenge yesterday.
Yeah, I did not do a league challenge. I just played locals, but I'm doing a league challenge next Sunday. Yeah, I think I'm gonna play Gardevoir EX. But Jake, what did you play?
I played the Chin Pao list that we talked about on last week's podcast. Owen's 12th place Chin Pao list with the cross switchers and the canceling clone. And that might be my favorite deck that I've played so far this format and just like messed around with. I mean, I've played like United Wings, I've played Chin Pao now, I've looked around like on Lost Box and, you know, watched plenty of Guardy. I think Chin Pao that build is specifically my favorite to play right now. I went 2-1, got second at the challenge, so that's 12 points for CP. I'm trying to get as much CP as I can before the academic year starts, because that will take away all of my weekends. Maybe try to qualify for 2024 Worlds. Who knows? We don't have, by the way, the point requirements for 2024 Worlds. That'll be announced after the World Championship. So right now, I mean, you can start collecting CP, get some points, stuff like that. Yeah, what Sean's saying, I think it's probably going to end up being like 500. That's what it was before. Yeah, that's what it was before the pandemic. 500 points, North American Masters. I would assume it's probably going to mirror like what it was in 2019. If I had to take a guess, because events are back in full force now the entire year, not just like half the season, stuff like that. And cups and challenges, locals and stuff are back. So who knows? But I will keep playing Chin Pao.
I will say, the Gardevoir list I'm playing has I'm going to name one card that I put in the deck or a couple cards that I put in the deck. I'm doing a slight tweaked version. Roseanne's Backup is in my list.
Roseanne's Backup. So you're definitely playing Reversal Energy.
I'm also playing one Drifloon and a Bravery Charm.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So in some practices and like when I was playing the games, the Roseanne's Backup, I don't know if it came into play in the actual tournament, but like in practice, it was like useful. I'm also playing Arven because I'm playing Forest Sealstone and Bravery Charm.
Makes sense.
And you can also go get Rare Candy with Arven. It's kind of like Irida for Gardevoir.
Yeah. So. And that's pretty much, I do. Yeah, that's not too bad, especially like after you've set up enough and now you just need to get those things evolved. It's actually not a terrible idea. And on turn 2, it could be pretty good if you've got like kind of facing off against kind of a weaker Pokemon that you don't have to attach like 18 energies to. You can just attach like 3 or something to a Zacian or whatever, or, you know, Cresselia even. Get some damage from Cresselia. So that doesn't sound too bad.
And I'm going to tell you right now, Jake, there's one other card that I haven't put in the deck, but I looked it up today. I'm going to try Agatha in my list.
Agatha? What is that? Move damage counters from one of your Pokemon to another to
Jake,
your opponent?
That's incredible. I would not have been able to
does?
Move up to 3 damage counters from your active to your opponent's active. Now the reason
So your idea is to do that with like Drifloon or Zacian or one of those or Gardevoir with one of those ultra heavy hitters?
Yes. So and we'll get into this when we get into the current format, but weirdly VMAXs are all of a sudden all the rage again in the format. And especially against decks like Gardevoir, you just need so much energy that it can be really hard to one shot. And I found myself, I played against some UV The only game I lost on the weekend was to Mew VMAX because I was 10 damage short. And I'm like, if only, X, Y, or
Mm-hmm.
Z. And that thought, and then Drifloon, actually, it could hit 330 if you could get 11 damage counters on him, but it doesn't work that way. It's not
Mm-hmm.
normally possible. But I was like, how I just need 1 damage for an Umbreon or 3 whatever. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
Agatha gets you there because it takes you from an even number of damage counters to an odd number of damage counters. That's all that matters. And it does 30 damage in the process. So it could be the difference between, instead of 30 damage, it might actually be a 60 damage swing with one
Mm-hmm.
supporter card. So it's like in certain decks, I think in this deck, it could be like a Leon, effectively.
That's kind of how I felt about Chin Pao, on how I'm like, Chin Pao, 5 energies can hit for 300, right? 5 energies being discarded, but the VMAXs, they're all over 300, 310, 320, 330 or whatever. So I'm like, what if I had like a choice belt in there? Because there are people some Gardevoirs are now playing like 2 Manaphies now to get
Oh
around the
my
canceling
God.
colognes, and sometimes I feel like I don't need to do the canceling cologne plays. I mean, they're nice at times, but I feel like sometimes I don't need it, especially with Lost Box kind of on a slight decline at this point. And we'll talk about more about the decks and stuff. But I'm like, what if I took away the canceling colognes and added like a choice belt or something? I'm not 100% sure what the other card would be, but like, what if I added that in there as well? It's like, it's an interesting thought. I don't know how I feel about it, but or maybe
Yeah.
just 2 choice belts.
I mean, honestly, choice belt, because look, to your point, you're hitting 300. 1 extra
Mm-hmm.
energy doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like if all you need to do is there's nothing in the format that matters. That's 340.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can hit 300 and you just need to add 30 for all the V's and Vmaxes, then the only thing that you really miss is the Gardevoir EX. That's the only
Mm-hmm.
one that you actually kind of like still are like 10 short on. But like, I don't know. I think you just take that one, right? You just like whatever.
It's interesting, and I'll let you know if I change it up. I'm still thinking about it or whatever. But we got a ton of things to talk about in this podcast episode today. So the first one that we are going to do is we're going to go into like a little like podcast review, show note, kind of note that somebody made to us over on Twitter. This is Michael Heredia. I'm not sure if I pronounced your name right, but apologies for that. But they commented over on Twitter. They're a Metapod listener, and I had tweeted recently that I picked up like a bunch of retro cards over at a local card shop, and they said plays in 0 retro format tournaments, but here's you talk about said tournament on the Metapod, and then proceeds to buy cards from the local card shop to start building a Pika Rom deck. So I think it's just funny because I've been super into retro formats and retro decks for the last week and a half, 2 weeks. So it was just funny to see someone on Twitter also feel kind of the same way.
That's awesome. Inspiring.
I'm playing also in a EX era tournament tonight. So maybe next week I'll talk about it or post about it on Twitter or whatever, or Threads, because the Metapod is on Threads now at Metapod TCG if you want to follow that. But anyways, Sean, that is not the only thing that I've got people talking about on Twitter. Sean, let's pull up what the next thing is. Stefan Ivanov, former international champion and also expanded guru, tweeted out earlier today at the time of this recording, so Monday. Expanded is back, sort of, at least. Pokemon professors, at least in France, were notified yesterday that this quarter, League challenges can be run in the expanded format, black and white on, with the current ban list as far as we know. So, Stefan, in my opinion, is someone that is trustworthy. I think we can take this information at heart. So, I don't know, just something to note. Maybe ask your organizers or whatever, or keep an eye out on the schedules if there are expanded events that will be coming back soon. I think the general note that most people, at least in my local area, would rather play standard challenges instead of expanded. But who knows? Maybe at one point they'll throw over an expanded challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think expanded is interesting. It's been so neglected now for
Hmm.
like 3 or 4 years. And now look, this is in France that professors were notified that league challenges can be run and expanded. I would be very surprised if anyone in the North American market runs a league challenge and expanded until a Pokemon officially announces that expanded. I don't know. It's just it feels kind of weird that the news would come from like go directly to the professors rather than like to stores or as an announcement because yeah,
Hmm.
you want people to broadly know like that expanded is back so that they can go buy the cards because there's tons of new players that don't
I'm not
have.
I'm
Yeah.
not really seeing on this thread like other professors or anything that have confirmed that it's
Mm.
returned. Like no, none of the like popular, Pokemon professors over on Twitter. I'm not seeing any of those. Just some people that are excited, some people that are not excited. But I mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, like, I don't want, I don't really want to play expanded right now until they like update the ban list or something like that. I mean, they got to do a little bit more work for me to play, but like honestly, like if my league announced next week like hey, we're having an expanded challenge, I mean, I need points as much as I can before September 1st. So,
I
I'll play in it and at least try. I don't know, but
I will say, Jake, I will say it would be kind of wild as a format though because you can't play it online. You just
yeah.
can't. The cards don't
Mhm.
exist. And to your point, because they haven't really expanded the ban list at all, and
Mhm.
there's been like 3 years of cards since they really touched the ban list.
Mhm.
I'm sure that the meta would be absolutely wild. So
Yeah.
be interesting.
There's some you can look at that thread too if you see Stefan on Twitter. He's got some deck lists in there. There's articles that are people are linking in the thread too if you're interested to play. It is like Sean said a wacky format. There's a big card pool. It's just I don't really feel good about it.
Yeah. But Jake, real quick, it's outside the scope of the TCG, but
Hmm.
Pokemon Sleep, in terms of things you could maybe feel good about, after what several years since they announced it, it seems
Oh
like
yeah.
Pokemon Sleep is actually going to be coming out sometime in late July. Um yeah, not really a TCG thing, but we're all Pokemon fans and it'll be interesting. Jake, are you going to participate in Pokemon Sleep?
I'm going to participate. The pre-registration is open ahead of the launch coming later in this month in July. There's a trailer as well and stuff. Again, using your smartphone, you can use Pokeball Go Plus, things like that. It's just like I'm just so curious about this and like it does promote sleep, which is very nice for someone like me. I mean, you get like maximized 100 points if you sleep for at least 8.5 hours. Who knows if there'll be a way to like kind of cheat this, I guess. I don't know. And it looks like there's going to be like research community stuff in there, kind of like how it is on Pokemon Go, research events, things like that. You can gather Pokemon. It's just I don't know. I mean, it kind of feels like Pokemon Go where you can just kind of just casually do it. Like you can get super in depth and you can do it a ton, but you can also just do it like real casually. Like just open it up every once in a while or play a couple minutes every day or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though I'm super excited about it and I've been super excited about it for years, I truthfully am not super knowledgeable about it
Yeah,
because
I
it
mean, look,
just released and I've been focusing a ton on Pokemon TCG.
yeah, I mean, look, it's a fun thing that's coming out. It's part of the Pokemon Go universe of products and integration.
Hmm.
So, like, if you're into the Pokemon Go jam, yeah, just know that Sleep is on its way.
At least in the Pokemon Go universe, it has a better chance of a better launch because Pokemon Go, the Pokemon Go fan base is so big and player base is so big. So hopefully, it kicks off the gate. Obviously, it's not going to kick off the gate as well as Pokemon Go did, 7 years ago or whatever, because that was crazy. But, at least it can have like a good start to maintain a little bit and not like a start like Pokemon TCG Live.
Yeah. So, Jake, what is the next product that is Pokemon TCG related that we have to talk about?
The Pokeball TCG tins, if you're unfamiliar with those, they're tins about, I would say, smaller than the average person's head. There's Pokeball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, I think Premier Ball, Love Ball. We've talked about them before on the podcast, which is why I bring it up. There is a new wave of Pokeball tins that are releasing later this month, September 22nd, and it's going to feature a brand new Pokeball tin for all you collectors, this time being the Lure Ball. Sean, do you know what the Lure Ball is in the video games?
I don't know. Does it have something to do with fishing?
Yeah, I believe it's just ups your catch rate on Pokemon that you fish.
That makes
or
sense,
that you encounter via fishing. But if you've never gotten one of these tins before, it's a high quality tin. I do actually like the tin. They're very well made. I have the Pokeball actually.
Now, Jake,
I have a Great Ball like right here.
These are all like the plastic, right? They're not actually like a metal.
Yeah.
Tin.
No, yeah, they're just plastic tins and they're meant as like deck holders. So like you can fit like decks in here. I don't know many people that use them as like a deck box, but I mean, for like small kids, for holding some cards, and even like for display, it's actually pretty cool. If you've never bought one of these before, they come with 3 booster packs, and these will come with 2 sticker sheets. They're going to retail for $15. So not too bad. I mean, 3 booster packs and a couple sticker sheets, plus this kind of high quality like container for $15. Honestly, not that bad of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you also if you're a collector, which I'm sure many of you are, and this is your jam, just knowing there's another one in the set, I have no idea what is left for them to make, because they've made like Quick Ball, Great Ball, Ultra Ball, Premier Ball, Pokeball, Lure Ball. Have they made a Love? I don't know.
I think they made a Love Ball.
Okay.
I don't know if they've made a Master Ball though.
That's a good question.
There's so many Pokeballs out there, Sean, and there's so many that they can do because like recently, I mean, Hisuian Heavy Ball, right? That's a newer Pokeball that they could eventually do. And so they can just keep creating Pokeballs and even go back to some of them like I can't remember if it was Kanto or Johto in the anime, the Gold Ball.
Oh, interesting.
Do you know which one I'm talking about? Yeah, like they could go to those too. So
yeah.
I don't know exactly, but for you collectors out there that are looking for gifts, that's a fun one to do.
The next one here is an EX box. We talk about all of these as well when they get announced. This is the Oinkologne EX box. It will release on September 3rd. It says here at Best Buy, maybe it's a Best Buy exclusive. Hard to say. But the whole point here is like, look, if you saw Oinkologne when you looked at the Paldea Evolve set list and you were like, well, I really want to play it, and you really don't want to buy the singles right now, you can get one of them in September for $22. And it'll come with Oinkologne, a Lechonk, jumbo card, if you're a jumbo card collector, and 4 booster packs. So pretty standard stuff.
It's very similar to like the Dubwool from Champion's Path, I think that set was. Very similar to that. The Lechonk Hollow though is pretty nice because I don't think we have that Lechonk yet in just like a foil pattern. And it looks like also it's going to have Obsidian Flames in it. If you look on the box now, obviously this could change. It looks like a Charizard with the fire or like some sort of Terra on it. It looks like kind of a fiery Pokemon with some sort of Terra. So it might be Obsidian Flames. I don't know. Could come with 2 of those and then 2 of Paldea Evolved, which would be pretty nice. But again, that can like we just said, that could immediately change. They've done that before.
Yeah, I mean, look, it does make sense if it has it because September 3rd, Obsidian Flame will be releasing. So like,
Hmm.
it all makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one thing we know it probably won't have any Pokemon 151. So if you're if you're
Nope.
hoping to snag some of that, you'll have to buy specific collection boxes just for that. I'm assuming when that comes out.
And there was we're not talking about it on the podcast because I went in to go check. If you actually pre-ordered 151 products on the Pokemon Center's website, there was a special 151 Squirtle hollow that
Oh,
you would get. But when I went to go look on the website, if like it was still, you could still do it or whatever, all of the 151 was sold out. All of
doesn't
it.
surprise me. It's a very
Yeah.
hype set.
I mean, it is going to be a really, really cool set, and I'm very excited for it. And that's a really cool promo card as well. But it just, unfortunate, you might miss out on the promo card. But you could still probably get it at like your Targets, your GameStops, your Walmarts, your local card shops, things like that.
Jake, are you ready to talk about some of the meta decks that maybe caught not everybody by surprise, but had some like twists and turns and maybe shaking up what people thought the meta would be?
There was a lot of stuff over at NAIC, and we talked about it a little bit briefly last week, but now we're going to get into the thick of it of the different decks that we saw that maybe we hadn't talked about in the previous weeks of the Metapod podcast. So the first one that we're going to go over is Arceus Duraludon Umbreon. This is Ian Robb's second place list, the runner-up list of the North American International Championships. And this is just overall, this is just kind of everything overall. Arceus decks did really well. It kind of surprised me and a lot of other people, I feel like, how well Arceus actually did. Arceus Duraludon, Arceus Giratina, just Arceus decks in general. We talked about last week, the Chin Pao, Owen Rhodes 12th place Chin Pao list had a 1-1 Arceus line in it, something that we didn't really expect, I guess you could say. So Arceus in general is just doing really, really nicely. And with the Duraludon as well, we've kind of talked about it previously, but Arceus Duraludon with the Umbreon as well is just very interesting. A lot of people have been playing this lately, in terms of since NAIC, and this honestly feels like one of the easier decks to play for the most part, I would say.
Yeah, I mean it's a wild deck because if you just look at the format, right? You have Arceus, which can power up a variety of different types. So you can easily play 3 different types of energy in this deck. And then, for this version of it, you're like saying, well, I'm going to shut down special energy decks with Duraludon VMAX, which is super chonky, hits for good damage. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I think Arc Dura was something that a lot of people thought was just good for a long time now. You sprinkled in Umbreon VMAX at a 2/2, and now you have a free boss's order on evolution. You have something that hits for, weakness against 2 of the, better decks in the format. You have Gardevoir and Mew, which I think this deck's popularity, I think, is a huge reason that Mew has just fallen off a cliff. Because, if you're Mew, you're sitting here like, okay, well, unless I can kill the Umbreon V every time before it evolves with a boss, which like is possible, I suppose. But like you leave one out there, they just evolve, bring your thing up, retreat, attack, 3 prizes. And then at that point, you're like, well, the odds of me being able to hit 310, even as Mew VMAX, super low. So, but yeah, outside of that, like it's pretty straightforward. Like Adventurer's Discovery has finally found a home in this deck.
I feel like this may be a hot take, but I feel like Adventurer's Discovery is the best card in this deck. Like it would not surprise me to see a trend of people taking this 3 of, 4 of even, because it's just so important, one, to find all your dudes, right? Arceus, Duraludon, Umbreon, and even something like Lumineon, but to find their evolutions as well. Having an Adventurer's Discovery, right, on turn 2
Yeah.
Your second turn of the game could also be a boss's orders with that Umbreon VMAX. So it's just really interesting seeing this list. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw like one less boss, one more judge, or something like that added in here, or like another path to the peak or something like that. It's Adventurer's Discovery is really cool. I agree, Sean. It's really interesting that it's found a home.
Yeah. And I mean, outside of that, I think this deck is just really annoying with Lost City
Mm-hmm.
because we've talked about it before. I think Lost City is one of these decks where like it only really works in decks that don't have another stadium that they actually really want. So
Mm-hmm.
like typically Path to the Peak is like if you don't have abilities, that's just the one that you throw in there. But you have abilities in this, so you don't really want to screw with that too much. So you're like, well, I don't really need anything else. What I need is for my opponent not to have answers after I take a knockout. And for a lot of these decks, like Gardevoir included, the one that I play a lot, you might only have one of each attacker or like, two of any main attacker. If they just go away, even if you're playing like a single prize strategy, you just run out of things to kill them with.
It takes away, in my opinion, Lost City takes away a lot of the random decks.
Yeah.
Takes those away, some of which we're going to be talking about today in terms of counters. It takes away the Gardevoir, like you mentioned, also takes away the Lost Box, right? Because the biggest thing is that it's really hard to one-shot your dudes, right? Unless you're hitting for weakness. So if you can continuously do that trade, you're not with Duraludons or Umbreons or whatever, you're not putting guys back from the discard pile into the deck. So instead of something like Echoing Horn, a card that's played in United Wings, which we'll talk about later, a card that's played in Gardevoir, a card that can appear in something like Lost Box, it's actually more beneficial for your knocked out Pokemon to go to the Lost Zone instead of the discard pile.
Yeah, that's very true.
So it's
Which,
like
yeah, I
this,
don't even
I
think
mean,
that. I was gonna say I don't even think that obviously they played against the Urshifu deck, but
mhm.
it was almost not fortuitous, but it's like almost forethought. Like it was good against Echoing Horn, but now that the Rapid Strike Urshifu Rapid Strike deck is more popular, it's even better against Echoing Horn because there's way more of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, you just don't want your opponent to just get those guys from the discard pile back onto the bench, because a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just put another Arceus down, especially because Arceus is the smallest of the three, I would say. Putting the Luminion back onto the bench, because
Yep.
Luminion is even easier to KO out of all the dudes. Or even something like Spiritomb, which in a matchup that Spiritomb is not beneficial for, right? It's just a nuisance to have on your bench.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So
true.
very cool list to see through Ian Robb. Again, piloting to second place. Ian's very, very good player. I see this deck getting more and more popular, just especially at locals as well. People have these cards a lot. I believe Duraludon is also a play Pokemon promo.
Hmm.
So the cards are relatively cheap to get. Probably just Umbreon is your most expensive card that you're going to grab. So not too bad.
Yeah. Jake, speaking of Arceus, and we're going to talk a lot about him today, there was another Arceus list that did really well over the weekend at NAIC. Jake, what is the other? It's Arceus Umbreon, but with a twist.
This is Michael Catron's concoction. This reached top 8 at the North American International Championships. There's Arceus in there, Arceus V-Star. There's the Umbreon, like Sean mentioned, Umbreon V-Max, and we've talked about its value with the gusting effects, hitting for weakness, and stuff like that. But there are some friends in here. There's another VMAX in this list, a 1/1 line of Flying Pikachu VMAX. Remember, the Flying Pikachu is good going into something like Lugia because it will hit for weakness and one-hit knockout, but also preventing damage done to this Pokemon by basics. All basics. So that's United Wings, that's Chin Pao, that can be Gardevoir, right, with the Zacian
Lost
V.
Box.
Lost Box, yep, just literally all basics. Um, And so with a big, beefy Pokemon like we've been talking about, it's very difficult to get around some of these things, and they can be very, very strong. There's also a couple other Vs in here, Sean. Have you ever read what Slacking V does?
I think I've read it at one point, but let's read it again. Has it?
Slacking V has the ability, kinda lazy. It's a 230 HP basic Pokemon V normal type. If you have exactly 2, 4, or 6 prize cards remaining, this Pokemon can attack. So, okay, interesting. But for 4 colorless energies, it can do 260 damage. So, with playing something like Path to the Peak, or just trying to, prize map into getting odd numbers or something, Slacking V can be a very, very heavy hitter in a list like this. And with 230 and potentially a V-Guard energy, 250 is kind of like a weird number that
Yeah.
people struggle to hit, Sean.
Yeah, and if you're doing 260 damage with no weird repercussions, right? Like usually if
hmm
you do this much damage on a basic, it's like you can't use this attack or your Pokemon takes 30 or something. And it is 4 energy, which, is a lot.
It can be powered with the double turbo, right?
Yeah.
It could get with the Arceus Trinity Nova, you could put 2 basics and then a double turbo on it the next turn. To hit for 240, which still knocks out every single V
Yeah.
in the format. So there's a lot of flexibility with this card, and it is very cheeky, I would say.
Yeah, and I will say too, you have a 2 prizer with this
hmm
card that also has the ability with a choice belt to take a knockout on Vs and V stars because you're doing 260. So if you do the regular amount, like
hmm
without any double turbos, you could do 290 on a V star with a basic 2 prizer.
You
It's
could
great.
also do some cheeky things if you do have to attach the double turbo. So let's say you've got the double turbo, you've got the choice belt, right? So you're doing 270 damage. You're facing up against an Arceus V-Star. Arceus V-Star does 280. There's another V Pokemon in here that we actually talked about last week that has made an inclusion in this list because it is very good with double turbo. You can knock out that Arceus V-Star on the following turn with a Yoga Loop Medicham to give yourself an extra turn because there is a Medicham Rapid Strike V in here that can Yoga Loop. You've also got a Radiant Alakazam as your Radiant of choice, like most other Arceus Duraludon decks, to move damage counters, manipulate into Yoga Loops, along with a flying entry Halucha in there. So I think the big game plan for like this deck specifically is to get off the Yoga Loop.
Mhm.
It seems like you have a bunch of different, you have a couple different manipulators in the Alakazam and the Halucha to be able to make that happen.
Yeah.
So very, very, it's a cool list. It's very interesting to see Flying Pikachu VMAX back in. We saw it at the World Championships last year with Andre, but yeah, it's been kind of dark since then. But now it's just come back.
Yeah, it is good. I think that it's not nearly as good as it was before, to the point we're making about all the other decks we're talking about. So many decks now are evolutions of some kind.
Mhm.
So, but like you said, you still have Lost Box, and if Chen Pao does well, or if you hit a Chen Pao, like cool, you're on easy street if
Yeah.
you're up against a Chen Pao list.
Yeah, they
Um,
have to be playing. They have to be attacking with the Arceus
or Palkia.
or the Palkia, whichever one they play. They can't play both,
No.
probably. More than likely, they're not playing both, but they got to hit with either one or the other. So, yeah, like as you were saying, it's just a really interesting option that, although may not come up all the time that you use it, when you do use it, it's very impactful.
Yep. Jake, there is even one more Arceus list. I think this one, playing one of our favorite cards, in
This
Aerodactyl V Star. Yeah.
Yeah, Sean texted me before. He's like, remember, we got to talk about, like, before the podcast. He's like, we got to talk about some of the decks. from NAIC, and he was like, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but I got one deck that I want to talk about. And he was like, I want to talk about Aerodactyl V-Star. So, Sean, tell me a little bit about this deck since you're so keen on it.
I mean, look, there's so many of these decks, and I especially think about like, okay, well, if I'm playing Arc, Dura, Umbreon, right? Like if that's one of my big things, or that's mainly it. Honestly, Arctura is the big thing. Maybe Mew, but I don't think Mew is as relevant now. But Aerodactyl V-Star has a single energy V-Star power. So basically, in those matchups, you basically say, "Hey, I'm not going to worry about Arceus's V-Star. What we're instead going to do, if we go first, because I think you have to go first in order to go this route. You evolve into Aerodactyl V-Star, make sure it's in the active." Use the attack Ancient Star, and until that specific Pokemon leaves play, it gains an ability that reads, your opponent's Pokemon V in play, except any Aerodactyl V-Star, have no abilities. So, doesn't matter.
It's very interesting because Starbirth is so good, right? Starbirth is so good. It's the consistency that just enables Arceus to be able to put literally what seems like any V printed alongside of it, and the V is not half bad. So it's interesting in the matchups when you go for either Starbirth or Ancient Star as your specific V-Star power, especially because this list is not playing any of the Adventures Discovery that I was hyping up in Ian Rob's list. So I mean, it's like Sean said, it's really weird. You play a lot of Disruption as well in this list, aside from the Ancient Star. You play the Mawile Tempting Trap, right? Sean, do you remember what that card does?
Basically, what is it? It makes it so that your opponent, during your opponent's next turn, that if any Pokemon can't retreat, and it takes 90 more damage from attacks. So, yeah, a lot of lists not playing a lot of switching cards or escape ropes. So you're basically saying, hey, hold up, wait a minute. I'm going to do more damage to you next turn. Let me get back to you on that, though.
You can also use the Yveltal that we've talked about before in the famous Sander decks, the Cry of Destruction Yveltal, discarding up to three special energies from your opponent's Pokemon anywhere on the field. So something like Mew, right, absolutely bodies the Fusion Mews that are running around right now. Any sort of Arceus deck, you can get rid of some energies, whether they're playing V-Guards, Double Turbos, etc., and more on top of that. You're using the Bibarel Squovit engine. I think those two are hand in hand. If you're playing the Bibarel engine, play the Squovit too. It's really nice to just see like 5 new cards every single turn through those, Sean.
Yeah, and the only other thing that is, I think, particularly of note, because otherwise the deck, it's sort of it's a mid-range sort of deck that like it's not going to win quickly. It's trying to disrupt your opponent long enough to like run them out of the ability to come back. That's basically, I think, what this deck goes for. But I will say, Box of Disaster is in this deck, which it's a Pokemon tool. If you've never heard of it, I don't blame you. And it says, if the Pokemon V this card is attached to has full HP and is knocked out by damage from an attack from one of your opponent's Pokemon, you put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon, which, you know, I think it's an interesting card if you are going second and you have to leave something in the active and you're like, hey, my opponent might be able to turn 2 going first or whatever, like knock one of my Vs out. Because I don't think it's really hard for a lot of decks actually to knock out a V-Star in any capacity while it still has no damage counters on it. So that I think is less likely. So, but it's good because your opponent has to be like, well, I want to take these prizes, but if I do that, I basically set myself up to be return KO'd immediately.
Exactly. That's the big thing about the Box of Disasters is if that Pokemon does chase, they have a chance to be knocked out on the following turn because, again, you're putting that 8. Fun fact, I actually almost played Box of Disaster for NAIC.
Oh, wow.
I almost played Arceus Goodra, Arceus V-Star Goodra. I was set on playing Goodra, just what shape or form I wasn't sure, but the Arceus Goodra list that I had or was playing a couple copies of Box of Disasters. So I was on the right track. I was on the right track. But yeah, very, very cool list. I will say that came up in the top 25 of the international champions. And again, like Arceus, just the rise of Arceus V-Star in general, right? And this doesn't even discuss the other random things that you can put with it, like Meowscarda. Yeah, you weren't on Twitter, Sean, but the Meowscarda conversations before NAIC on that social media on Twitter were bountiful and memeful. I would say.
I mean, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Is Arceus the best Pokemon we've had since Zoroark?
I think so. Because I think it's like a little bit of a step down from Zoroark, but it's very similar in the effect that it enables so many other Pokemon, right? Like, I mean, I talked about how I played in that cube during NAIC, and the cube was entirely all the partners that Zoroark GX has had in its years. And I mean, I can talk about the retro decks I'm building right now. You know, in 2018, Robin Scholl's won with Zora Garbodor, right? Trashlands Garbodor and the Garbotoxin. There in 2018 was Zoroark Lycanroc GX, the Bloodthirsty Eyes Lycanroc, which is basically like Umbreon VMAX with the ability. Decidueye was paired up with Zoroark. The Ninetales was paired up with Zoroark. There are just so many options, and Arceus is doing that exact same thing. That I don't think it's as good as Zoroark, because Zoroark, I feel like could have been its like standalone deck, and it was good as like a standalone deck for a time being. Where I don't know if Arceus quite has that. I know it got some glimpses of it, but I don't think it hit the level that Zoroark did when it was a standalone. But it has that same effect of like, it just makes so many other cards good. It's crazy. It's wild to see. It'll go down as one of the best.
I think that it's a great example of, if you're going to give a Pokemon a colorless energy attack, you really have to decide. You have to like balance that with like, okay, are we going to make this card the most broken thing ever or not? Because that's what Zoroark was. It was a colorless energy attack. Now, it wasn't a colorless attacker, which to your point, I might argue that's actually better, because you actually hit for weakness sometimes. But yeah, like I think that from a design perspective, it's kind of like, the second you make every energy on your attacker colorless, you open it up completely. So.
It's just crazy. I mean, because trade, discard 1, draw 2 was so good on Zoroark, but Starbirth is also so good, even though it's just a one-time attack. It's interestingly balanced, I feel like. To an extent. They're very similar, but they're balanced in the power. It's very, very cool. It wouldn't surprise me if people look back like 5 years down the line now, you know, building retro decks and stuff. They're building like different Arceus decks, you know, similar to how, like, I mean, Sun and Moon base set to Lost Thunder is like the heralded format of, you know, the last 10 years or whatever. I don't think Arceus will ever reach to that point, any of the Arceus eras, but I think it'll have that same effect, that people will just build a lot of like Arceus decks and look back and enjoy playing a lot of Arceus decks, because it enabled, again, so many cards. I sound like a broken record.
Yeah, hey, Arceus Cube when? Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, Arceus Cube went. That would be so cool, dude. That would be interesting. I would love to see that, actually.
Well, you're living in the now times. Anybody can build it. The cards are here, and they're cheap.
Yeah, it's stupid cheap too after coming out in the trainer's toolkit. Yeah, very interesting. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should try to build an Arceus cube. I don't know, and just like errata the Arceus and the cube to be like any like rule box Pokemon, so it can accelerate the energies to like a GX or something like that, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting. I feel like.
All right, Jake. There was one that you were hyped on from Mr. Schmansky. What deck
Well,
was
we have to
that?
specify Alex Szymanski.
Which Szymanski?
Yeah,
Yes.
because there's
There are two.
there's a couple there's a couple Mr. Szymanskis, but anyways, Alex Szymanski piloted this United Wings list for a top 64 finish at the North American International Championships. This one, in my opinion, is the most likely to catch on out of all of the decks that we saw, primarily because this is an insanely cheap deck to build. Your most expensive card is probably like the Squawkabilly EXs, right? And that's a pretty cheap buy. I feel like this United Wings engine plays all three of the United Wings birds: Watro, Murkrow, Flamigo. Plays 2 Ditto. Obviously, got the Manaphy in there to protect your bench. Squawkabilly EX is very, very important to get Squawkabilly turn 1 in this deck to just churn through your deck, get people in the discard, and also maybe to set up your support Pokemon in this list. The Refinement Curlias. Yes, the discard draw 2 is perfect for the United Wings because it's a really easy way to discard your Pokemon in the discard. You've got the Dittos to copy attack, so you can get all 12 of the Pokemon if you want in your discard pile, Sean. But it's really cool as well because let's say the Ditto is not going to do it, or, you know, whatever, you can actually attack with Curlia's Evolution Gallade. This list specifically plays 2 different Gallades. It can play the Buddy Catch Gallade, which I think is really, really good. You're not really attacking with that one, but I find that one to be really interesting in different matchups, not only to find specific supporters every turn like Clara, Boss's Orders, Research, Serena, any of those, but also in something against like Lost Box, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of knocking out your Curlias, right, with the Sableye, they got to put in a little bit more work to knock out your Gallade because Gallade is at 160 HP. So very, very cool. And then there's also, if you'd rather attack, maybe you're facing a Arceus deck that we've talked about because Arceus is booming in popularity. You have a fighting type Gallade in there. And this one you actually can attack with because its attack is 2 colorless energies. So fits perfect with the double turbos that you use on the Flamigos, Watrels, Dittos, etc. That attack is 60 times the amount of Pokemon V your opponent has in play. So you can catch them sleeping in the Arceus Duraludon matchup, just absolutely whacking one of the big dudes, the VMAXs, and you can hit the Arceus V for weakness. So there's I mean, this list is really cool. I played this a little bit at like locals and stuff like that. It is a little bit harder to pilot because it's not like what's the old deck that people always refer to? What?
Not Mad Party.
It was the one before that. It's like Black and White era. Shoot, I can't remember what it was. But anyways, this kind of sort of play style, Night March, yeah, Night March. That's what it was, Night March. It doesn't have the same speed, power, and aggression, I feel like, as Night March, but you can still do a lot of damage and a lot of really cool plays, just maneuvering around and mapping out, you know, being able to use, you know, your Ultra Balls effectively, Level Balls, Clara, etc., etc. This is really cool, too. I remember I was playing this, and I went like back-to-back heavy balls because this list actually plays 2 heavy balls. And my opponent was like, whoa, wait a minute. Because he like was half paying attention and he was like, wait, did you just play the same heavy ball twice in a row? And I was like, no, I swear. This list plays 2 heavy balls and I just used the bat. I swear I'm not cheating. But it was just really, really funny and really, really cool. Because again, I mean, if those guys are in the prizes, you need them out. So it makes sense. There's just a lot of cool things in here. And again, it's the cheapest meta list that you're going to be able to play.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like it's really cool too, because it doesn't really matter which version of the Ralts at least you play in this list. Like you don't care about teleportation or any of that. It's just all to evolve into Curlia so you can play the fancy Ralts if you happen to have pulled them. Yeah.
I do kind of think the fancy Ralts is the play though, especially for the because you're not playing psychic energy, so memory skip, the 60 HP one doesn't work. But
Yeah.
especially with the evolution of Rapid Strike Inteleon Urshifu, especially with, Chin Pao. Well, that one doesn't necessarily matter too much, but just like Lost Box in general as well. Just having the 70s in there are probably more beneficial. It's just, even though it's 10 extra HP, it is a little bit more difficult to be able to knock those guys out.
Yeah, it's true. We got one more deck to cover off on, and that is I want to say it's Jose Morero's Ting-lu list, which I don't know if any of our listeners have played against Ting-lu or not, but it can be wildly annoying to play against Ting-lu. Jake, you were the one who called this one out. What about this touched you?
I think a big thing about this is against the Arceus decks, right? Again, I mean, just Arceus in popularity. Ting-lu hitting for weakness, you can really bop Arceus decks for a multitude of reasons, and not just that you're hitting for weakness. Ting-lu, if you do not know, has the ability, if this Pokemon is in the active, your opponent's Pokemon that have damage counters on them cannot use their abilities. They don't have abilities. So,
isn't it say except for Pokemon EX?
It might. Let me just pull it up. But anyways, while I look that up, you're spreading your damage counters out a lot with things like Holucha, Radiant Alakazam, right? You can put damage counters in places. But yes, it is except for Pokemon EX. But I mean,
it does non-basics, right? Does it do or is it only basics? I'm just double checking. Is it
No, it's just any
That's great.
Any of the opponent's Pokemon in play that have no abilities except for Pokemon EX. So all it really doesn't affect is like Chin Pao, Gardevoir, and like Ting-lu. I guess maybe Miraidon, but
yeah.
I guess maybe Miraidon as well. But anyway, so you look at a bunch of the different meta decks. There are so many decks right now that are built on abilities. The Arceus deck, Starbirth is very good ability. The Umbreon Gusting effect is very good ability. Lost Box, Mew, right? There are so many different decks that utilize abilities, and so Ting-lu is an excellent way to slow down the game and really disrupt your opponent. There's also plenty of cards in here to help get you where you need to go. It's playing the Bravery Charm, so your Ting-lus are at 290 damage. And I didn't even mention Ting-lu's attack. I'm sorry. So I mentioned the Holuchas and the Radiant Alakazam to put damage counters on the different Pokemon on the field. But Land Scoop, Ting-lu's attack for 3 fighting energy, does 150 damage and puts 2 damage counters on one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So just another way, again, to just put damage counters in different places. You're playing Judges and Ionos, so you can really get your opponent's hands stuck if they get off to a faster start. Jose's list plays the Gape Jaw Bog. That when you put a Pokemon from your hand to your bench, you put 2 damage counters on it. He plays those, but I've seen people like Andrew Mahone, Tricky Jim, he on stream the other day was playing it with, I think it's called Primordial Altar. Sean, do you know what that is?
Oh, I don't remember what it said.
Primordial Altar is a stadium card. Primordial. I'm like looking it up to make sure I get it correctly. Once during each player's turn, that player may look at the top of their deck. They may discard that card. So can really work well with the Gusty Pickaxes that you're playing in this list, right? Because Gusty Pickaxe, you draw a card if it's a fighting energy, attach it to one of your Pokemon. So you can use it in combo with that. You can also just use it in combo to churn through your deck, right? If you use Primordial Altar and you see maybe like a Battle VIP pass and it's like turn 3, you can be like, nah, discard that card. Discard that card and I'll top deck something else the next turn that may be more beneficial. So there's a lot of different ways to use this list, and I think it's really, really cool and something that can also dominate in locals. If you're looking for, again, another cheap deck to take to locals to have fun with, I think this one can, get you some league challenge points, to be honest, or maybe even a cup.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I played against one Ting-lu deck, and it actually runs surprisingly fast because between Gutsy Pickaxe and the trekking shoes.
Ultra
You actually get,
balls.
yeah, you get the energy onto your ting-lu pretty quick, surprisingly. Um, the one card I think that you might consider again. I think I'm a big proponent of this card is Arvin. I
Mm-hmm.
just if you're playing a deck that has any use for tool cards, and if they're halfway important to your deck, getting a tool and an item, and that item could be Battle VIP, Ultra Ball, Escape Rope. Uh, you know, I think even like I know there's no supporter search in here, so it might be the reason why there's not a one of Arvin. But hey, I like Arvin, so it's my
It
thought.
is an interesting card and can see definitely more play. But Sean, we just mentioned in here accelerating energies, getting them into the discard. I think it's worth noting Koraidon EX
Yes.
has an ability for anyone who doesn't know that says once during your turn you may attach up to 2 basic fighting energies from your discard pile to your basic fighting Pokemon in any way you'd like. If you use the ability, your turn ends. So ideally, like turn 1, churning through with the trekking shoes, Ultra Ball, maybe Primordial Altar, things like that. Getting energies in the discard, you can Koraidon onto a ting-lu and then be able to be attacking potentially the next
Yep.
turn. So that's how you accelerate the energies in there. Jose has the 1/1 line of Lucario V-Star, which to
Mm-hmm.
be honest, I gotta look up what Lucario V-Star does. I actually don't know what it does, but it was a promo, so it's relatively cheap. You can get the beautiful illustrated promo art on TCG Player right now for less than $1. So very cool. You can bling out your deck. It's got 2 attacks, 1 fighting colorless, 120 plus. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon V, it does 120 more damage, right? So
That's pretty
I
good.
mean, you could like gust something up and hit it for 240 right away without the Holuchas or anything like that. So really cool. And then Aura Star, the V Star power is a fighting and colorless 70 times for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So that could be really
Great.
cool in something like an Arceus Duraludon matchup, right? Because they
Yeah.
accelerate a ton of energies in that matchup. And they can have a lot of energies in play in a single turn, or even something like Mew, right? Because Mew,
It
because
counts
you're
for two.
playing, yeah, and plus you're playing Ting-Lu, right? So you're putting all the damage counters on the Genesect. Well, to activate the Genesect again, they have to use the Fusion Strike energy. So they're putting the Fusion Strike energies on the Genesect. They're attaching a double turbo to the Mew. You could be like, all right, Lucario V-Star for 6 energies times 70. What is that, 420 damage?
Oh yeah,
To
it's
just
stupid.
really just bop them out. Yeah, it's a very interesting concept and idea because you're not using any other V-Star power in this list.
Yeah, it's great because it's also like against Duraludon,
Mm-hmm.
or probably Umbreon. Like these like really big V maxes that you're like, well, my Ting-Lu does 100 and 150. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
might be able to spread a couple of damage here and there. So, but at best, you're two-shotting them at best, right?
Yeah,
But
I
this
mean,
guy,
but
yeah,
and it's even good for cleanup, right? Because Ting-Lu EX has 240 HP, 290 with the Bravery Charm. So let's say you're facing off against an Arceus Duraludon Umbreon, and you're facing a Duraludon VMAX in the active. If you Ting-Lu them, right, for 150, they've got 150 on their, I think it's like 330 HP Duraludon. Even that number's irrelevant right now. Exactly. And I'll explain why here in a moment. They hit into you, right? They don't knock out because they only do like what, 220 from the Duraludon because Choice Band doesn't work
doesn't work.
on extra damage or whatever. So then you just switch into the Lucario V Star. You have those 2 energies on it. Duraludon needs 3 energies to attack. So at minimum, your V Star power is doing 210 damage, which in combination with the 150 that you put on it before with the Ting-Lu knocks out the Duraludon. So then you exchange like, and they can't one-shot your Lucario V-Star. So you're literally exchanging like 3 prizes to potentially 2 if they put in a little bit of work. So it's just a really cool list in my opinion. I'd recommend if you're looking for something cheap and fun to build that can do really well, United Wings, Ting-Lu, think are some cool decks.
Jake, I think that's it for the cool decks for now. I'm sure we'll see more in the lead up to Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say I didn't even realize this. Apparently, like the new 2024 season has already started. You can already start getting points.
I already have points.
Yeah,
I'm number one in North America. Just kidding. I don't think that's true. I think Rahul already has like over 30 or something like that. And I was like, drat, I could have been number one.
But like, it's if you have any locals coming up that are league challenges or league cups, you can get that early start. Go to your locals, get like 12 points, get 20, 30, however many points. Good luck to you, and know that like a lot of the people, you might get a lot of players who might be going to Worlds coming out to practice and to get points for the next season. But starting early is always a good thing if you want to like see by mid-season, like if you even have a shot, get a few points here and there, and then have fun.
I think it's really interesting too. I know at least for my local area, like Central Kentucky, there's a lot of challenges and cups and things like that very quickly. I don't know if other places have a ton of challenges. Like everybody is shooting out of the gate with cups and challenges right now. All the local stores, they're trying to get their stuff ready and going as soon as possible. So definitely check your Facebook groups, ask when you go to local league night or whatever, ask around to your friends, things like that. It's really, really cool. And it's a lot of fun. So yeah, definitely recommend trying to get your points now like I am, and I'll keep updating you as well as Sean, how we're doing in the season, what is to play, and also Worlds predictions coming soon in the next couple weeks. And we'll try to get some other fun as well, because I think news is gonna be a little bit low until the World Championship. So we'll think of some creative things coming up. But thank you so much for listening to the Metapop Podcast, Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. I'm Jake, that's Sean, and we'll see you next week.